Let's go.
Hello, we are the Keepers of Nerddom, formerly known as CNC. I'm Cody, this is Chris. And yeah, we are the Keepers of Nerddom, and we are super excited to talk about something today that's near and dear to both of our hearts. But I think it's even more dear to your heart, Chris.
Maybe a little bit.
Today we are talking about Dungeons and Dragons, and specifically like favorite race and class in the game system. Because we could do several videos about Dungeons and Dragons because there's a big thing
There's
here.
so much.
But first off, Chris, what got you into Dungeons and Dragons? Like, what is it that you loved and it introduced you?
So I've always been a big fan of the fantasy genre. I wanted to play growing up. I didn't have a lot of opportunities. I had some friends that played, but just anyone who plays Dungeons and Dragons knows the whole scheduling conflict.
Mm-hmm.
The game is the easy part. The scheduling's the hard part. But I started in college with some friends in 4th edition, which I don't recommend. It's basically like a video game on paper. You don't walk so many feet, you walk so many squares. If the only thing you like in Dungeons and Dragons is combat, go for it. It's great for that. But if you like the role play like me and most of my friends do, it's up to you. There's not a lot in the game for it.
Gotcha. So that's what's interesting is I actually didn't play Dungeons and Dragons growing up because my family was like, no, that's not good stuff. And so I didn't...
The satanic panic.
Yeah, yes. And so I didn't have any exposure to it, and my understanding was it was just completely evil. And when I actually got introduced to Dungeons and Dragons, I was playing with some friends on Dungeons and Dragons Online. Mm-hmm. Really not the same thing, because it is a video game.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it introduced me to this world and this concept, and gave me a feel for it, and then that same friend goes, do you want to actually play the old school legit stuff? I was like, yeah. And I actually got to DM that session. Mm-hmm. And I think we were using his old stuff because he's older even than me. And so I think he had 2nd or 3rd edition stuff that he loaned out to me. I mean, it was older.
3.5 is probably the most popular.
I can't remember what it was, but we had an adventure down in a sewer. And very quickly they realized that this adventure was in fact centered around Mario Brothers, and Bowser was down there. Actually, it was the great turtle Bowser, so it wasn't quite Bowser.
Yeah,
but
you told me about this.
Yeah, it was dumb, it was crazy, but we had a good time and we were laughing, and it introduced me to this world, and then we started playing more so here. But really, Dungeons & Dragons Online, even though it's not the same thing, it introduced me to this. And if you've ever played it, you'll know that several years back, there was a Halloween event that really, it was so bad it was good, known as the Lag Dragon. Like, they had too many players in the area, and if you summoned too many creatures for yourself, like everybody did, it would lag the entire game out, and you just watch the dragon come through, wipe everything out, and you'd lose. And there was nothing you could do because you were just lagging and just standing still. But that really did introduce me to this world, and it's a beautiful game. One thing I didn't understand in Dungeons & Dragons Online was how important such a simple thing of like dice were to the game. Mm-hmm. And before we get to talking about race and class stuff in the game, we've got, these are just some of my dice that I collect. I love blue, and so I collect any sort of hue of blue of dice that I see that just really catches my eye. But you have something even more special here, and what are these, Chris?
So these are from ArtisanDice.com. My younger sister got them for me for Christmas 2 years ago because I have, I don't know, tons of dice like a lot of players do. And she knows that they're very special to me. I don't remember what exactly it's called, but it's like these little Australian pine cone things that fall off bushes and kill animals. And it's inset with turquoise.
They're beautiful. And what was the website that you got these from?
ArtisanDice.com.
ArtisanDice.com.
Not an affiliate, not sponsored.
But it is a really cool place to get some very special,
they have
unique
some awesome stuff
dice.
There. They also have some highly toxic woods if you touch them.
So then how do you use them?
They put like a varnish on them, and you just don't break through the varnish.
You hope and pray you don't.
Yeah.
So it's a neat thing, like how important this was. And once you become a Dungeons and Dragons player, like your dice collection all of a sudden blossoms.
It's an addiction. It's a problem.
It is, and it's funny because you have this desire, like, I just want to have dice for this character, or just have, there's something new and shiny that I saw at the store.
Yeah.
That's really cool, and that's the beautiful thing too, is you get out of Dungeons and Dragons what you put into it. And that's the other thing, is like, if you're going into the really crazy dark levels of like maybe actually saying and casting spells, things are going to get a little bit weird, but it really is what you put into it. And for me, like, anytime I get to DM, I'm a lover of the homebrew stuff, in part because if you play with people that know the game well, they know all the stats of the creatures, or at least the base stats of what they should be.
Yeah, the metagame's real. We try not to. We all try not to.
So it's important to me to go, okay, I want to use these things to give you guys surprises. So that way it's a continuous thing of, what is this? But also it's all about your creativity and what you can get. Like our one of our sessions, you guys kept getting reset in the dungeon.
Yeah. And
you were getting frustrated.
I just started eating rocks.
And it was funny, but at the same time, I noticed you guys were getting frustrated too in actual life. And you were like, okay, so I've got to lessen up the resets. Yeah. Because you guys weren't figuring out the puzzle that to me made sense. But then ironically, when I actually gave you a puzzle, which is one of those, in Dungeons & Dragons Online, they have them all the time, and it's like, turn the thing to power up a place.
It is like a square with square pieces inside of it that when you turn them in the right order, it'll connect a line through all of it. And Cody was like, take a picture and come back next week with the solution. It's going to take you guys a while. So we all looked at it, turned it, and got it about 5 seconds.
Yeah, it was very fast, and I cried a little bit on the inside because I was like, I spent like 2 days just getting these pieces ready.
We're playing with a group of people who have been playing not only Dungeons and Dragons but video games for all of our lives.
Yeah, and it was cool to see. I was like, okay, good, nice to know. It sucks for me, but it was good to see that passion and desire. But let's really get into this, Chris. Like, when you come into Dungeons and Dragons, what is the favorite like race and class? And first, we'll do race that you have. You were talking to me too about like the early editions that they didn't have classes. Was that it? Or
they only had classes.
They only had classes.
And if I remember right, they're like magic user, fighting man, and
it sounds like
maybe ranger. It was the more stealthy type character.
It sounds like early Final Fantasy games where they'd just be like warrior.
Yeah.
Yay.
And that sort of stuff drew a lot of inspiration from Dungeons and Dragons.
Right.
And then as other classes, they added in elves and hobbits at first, but then that property is owned by the Tolkien estate, so they had to change it to halfling, which is what we have now.
Right.
And then later on, they added having classes and races.
So let's talk about races then. What is that race that you usually are drawn to in Dungeons and Dragons, and why? Because sometimes also it's power gaming, but also sometimes flavor of what excites you. And I think we have different answers on that in times. Because I've been a power gamer over the years, and there's points where I've hit now where I just go, I more so just want to have fun and enjoy certain things. And so I have to balance that.
And one of the newer books, Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, throws some stuff in for that, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But for a long time, anyone who tried to power game knows that 90% of the time you want to be human, but you want to be a variant human because then you start with a feat, and that can, as long as your DM allows feats. But that's just game changing, is starting with something that powerful.
Well, explain a feat real quick, just in case somebody's watching that doesn't.
So a feat is normally every few levels a character will gain an ability score increase, and instead of doing that, you can choose to take a feat, which is something that's going to give you a big bonus. Like, it'll give you extra health, or it'll give you defense against armor, or it'll give you extra damage with certain types of damage types, or it'll give you different abilities. And then a lot of them also come with, instead of getting 2 ability score increases, you get 1 added on, and some of them you don't get anything.
Right.
So the variant human, you get +1 to 2 different ability scores. You get the feat, you get a language, and I want to say that you get 2 more bonuses. I can't remember off the top of my head. But starting with that feat is like a no-brainer for anyone who wants to power game.
Give an example of a feat.
So there's like Polearm Master, where you can, when you make an attack with a polearm, you can make a second attack with the other end. You get a D4 damage, and opportunity attacks. No, that's the Sentinel, where opportunity attacks happen when they run away from you. But
Isn't there a feat that allows you to disengage from combat automatically? If I remember right.
I don't think so.
Okay.
That's an ability of a rogue.
Okay. I know as a monk I had something of that, and it was pretty ridiculously bonkers, because then monks are designed to strike multiple opponents ridiculous amounts, and so being able to auto disengage, I could just bye, see ya.
So the one you were doing was when you made an unarmed strike, you could disengage as a bonus action.
Yep. So feats are a very important thing. So variant human is something that you would say.
It's the only thing that starts with a feat, so that's why they're so powerful. But other than that, like, it really depends on the character. Like, they all have their special things. So if you want to play a smarter character, you might want to be a gnome, or if you want to be someone who's really strong, you might go with like a Goliath or half orc. Something like that. There's just so many different options. And then the Tasha's Cauldron of Everything is a book that came out this past November, and it gives a lot more options for altering the races and customizing them so that you can be like, so I'm this race, but I didn't necessarily like fit in with everyone. So instead of these normal boosts, I get this boost, which gave like dwarves a big bonus because instead of getting +2 to 2 different stats, which normally you get like +1 to 2, or you get +1 to 1, +2 to another. Instead of getting +2 to 2 different stats, you can change those stats to whatever you want with if you use Tasha's variants.
Wow. I mean, that's crazy. I'll say, I've played a lot of humans. I've actually really enjoyed, especially for just lore, the idea of an elf, and sometimes the variants inside those elves, but usually they have a higher wisdom score, several of them, and you have these things because an elf plays well into monk characters or magic users that use wisdom rather than intellect. And if memory serves, is that a cleric? Yeah. And so we'll get to those as well, but it's interesting because the one piece for me that's always fascinating is that if you look at the age ranges, an elf technically could be in a story from 300 years ago, and you could still show back up in a new campaign in that 300 years, and you're still active. You're still there. And you could be a side character, you could be a supporting piece, but your character can exist for a lot longer. And that's what's fun to me, is just that longevity at least gives you the ability to exist past that game if you survive. And hopefully your DM isn't a murder bot that just goes for the epic kills all the time. But that to me is always an interesting, and plus just the idea of an elf is serenity, is peace or calm, and that it reminds me of Vulcans in Star Trek, which obviously Vulcans probably drawn from these things, but that's always fun to play that more stoic character that's not always as easily relatable, but is in the background, always there and present. And you may not realize how necessary they are to the group because they're more quiet. Yeah, and it's interesting. It's a fun it's always a fun race to me to see. I've seen several people that they love certain types of races because they like to be the assassins or the things, and so they'll play the hobbits or the types of characters. Halflings, yeah, thank you. And it's funny to watch that because they play into this very very well. But sometimes you almost typecast yourself in games like that. I think my favorite was when one of our friends played it's the bird race that I don't think they have wings.
Oh, Kinku.
Kinku, yeah, and so they can only repeat things that they hear.
Yeah.
And so that was a challenge.
Yes.
He did well with it, but it was hard because, man, you can only say certain things.
Yeah, since they've been cursed to not have a language.
Yeah, so what a tough challenge, and it was funny to see the group dynamics playing out around that as, characters inside the game were getting frustrated as this person would say things back that were rude or not based on what was said to him. So, favorite class, like, go into some of that.
Oh, man, it really depends on the day. It really does.
Right.
Right now, the class currently that I'm most excited about that I haven't gotten to play yet is the Artificer. So originally it was introduced in Wayfarer's Guide to Eberron, and it had 2 subclasses. But now it's been reintroduced in Tasha's Cauldron and everything with the Armorer subclass, and that is what I really want to try out and just make a tank out the wazoo.
Right. So they've been in Dungeons & Dragons Online for a long time.
And they've been in older editions of D&D as well.
And so the Warforged also were in Dungeons & Dragons Online. And side note, that's another race that's very interesting.
And it was also introduced in Wayfarer's Guide to Eberron.
Which, how old is that?
It's like a year and a half old.
Okay. So, that's what's weird is just DDO had these things, and it's almost like maybe they invented some extra pieces.
Well,
and then push some.
I'm just talking about for 5th edition here.
Gotcha. So some of this has existed.
Yeah, it's definitely existed in like.
See,
3.
I don't know as much about some of the older editions, even though I played that one. But it's just interesting to be introduced to these things, and then they're just coming out in 5th edition, and some of those pieces they're so fascinating to how they operate and change things. Like a Warforged is just such a bizarre. Race in general because some of the things you're not affected by. Yeah. But then you also can't do certain classes very well at all because you're a machine. So you just don't have the same access to some of the magic in a way and some of that stuff, and it's just bizarre.
And then there's always the characters like I like the trope of it's like an anti-trope because a lot of people I've seen a lot of people do it, but it's like it feels like the opposite of what it is like a Warforged cleric or paladin where they follow a deity and they have this battle with themselves of do I have a soul?
Ooh, that's cool. Like that's good storytelling because that's a question that's hard to answer, and that's interesting. So I've always called it the Artificer, and so when you say Artificer, I'm like, my whole brain shuts down for a second. I'm like, I don't know what it's actually supposed to be called.
I don't know which one's correct. That Artificer is just what I've heard more.
It's interesting. I actually like that. It's just. I don't know, just playing the game, I think we just called it that, but there was no real reason. So, the Artificer is such an interesting class because they can make traps. At least in DDO, they had the ability to have a companion mechanical dog that would follow them.
And you get that in the...
one of the subclasses.
Battlemaster.
Okay. And that was so cool.
Battlesmith.
Just because you had this pet that leveled up with you, that was your companion, that you built.
Yeah.
And that was special. It's a cool one. So before the Artificer, what was your class you enjoyed using most? And don't say the Bard to, like, make babies with the rock golem.
I like to move around a lot. I think that one of my favorite characters I played was a monk.
Really?
A Kinsei monk.
Okay.
So he was a weapon-using monk.
Right. Okay. That was a monk I've not used.
Yeah, he was a tabaxi.
A tabaxi, like cats.
Yeah.
So, I'm turning over there now because Monk is one of my favorite classes. When I played DDO, I was introduced to several of these things. I think Artificer was my third favorite thing.
Mm-hmm.
I very quickly played a Cleric, and through D&D, I've played Clerics a few times. But you realize in actual D&D, and even on DDO,
mm-hmm.
what do you do as a Cleric? The answer is you don't fight well.
It depends on your subclass, because there's a ton more subclasses now. That's
the beautiful thing, is the subclasses help. It's just, oftentimes, especially in DDO, your whole idea was activate some sort of healing aura, jump into the middle of a combat and hold your shield down, and then do burst healing when you had to.
Mm-hmm.
And you were just there to sit with heavy armor and hope and pray you didn't get knocked out and keep healing the team.
And still in 5th edition, your best healer option is going to be a monk if you're going strictly...
A monk?
Or, sorry, is going to be a cleric.
Really?
Is going to be a cleric if you're going, like, strictly power healing.
Right. So, that's... It's an interesting class because you always are important as a cleric. Like, you're very important.
Mm-hmm.
But it's kind of a boring class.
I've definitely had friends that get bored with it.
Yeah, because you're not going to be the frontline fighter. You're not going to be the one knocking the head off of the orc or the goblin. You're going to be the one making sure they're still able to knock the head off the goblin. And that's it. Like, that's your role. And sometimes it just gets old.
Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things that I like about 5th edition is in the Dungeon Master Guide, it talks about options of if your party... If your player, let your players play what they want to play. If they don't want to have all the standard, if you will, parts to a team, a healer, a tank, a damage dealer, a stealthy person, then just work with your players. And if they don't want a healer, throw in some extra healing potions.
Right.
If they don't want a tank, put them up against stuff that needs a lot of damage to be taken, but doesn't deal as much damage.
Right. There's also the thing of putting in an NPC that goes with them.
Yeah.
Because oftentimes we've had groups that didn't want to have a healer, and so
mm-hmm.
I would send with you guys at least someone that had the ability,
mm-hmm.
Just to keep you going. And that's one thing that was interesting is I also really, my top person to play was the monk as well, because the monk isn't necessarily a class that, according to the game, is actually that great in the sense of they're going to get crazy strong at the end compared to some of the other things. Because wizards, they start off really weak, but at the end, the burst damage is
they're just boom.
Insane. They're a glass cannon, but they're a glass cannon. And then barbarians, they're
super great up front. They don't level as well as some others do.
Yeah. With the ability, is it the barbarians that have the ability to take a lot more health for a while, from what I remember?
They have the highest hit thing. Die. If you have like a Way of the Totem barbarian who takes a bear's totem, then he gains resistance to basically everything except for psychic damage.
Right. So it's just, I remember that they could hit really hard, and then they could actually put themselves up quite a bit with health. Mm-hmm. There was something that they could do that they could just like take half damage or something, and it was crazy. So all of a sudden their hit points went through the roof.
The bear totem takes half damage to everything.
Okay, that's what it was. Because I remember
at a certain point,
I remember being the DM, and all of a sudden our group was like, "Go ahead, hit it," and I would, and I'd be like, "All right, so you take 12 damage." You go, "I take 6." Oh boy.
Yeah, I was that barbarian.
Yeah, so there's just a slog through it, and I'm like, okay, that's insane. So, there's classes that just dominate in certain points. Mm-hmm. And not to say the monk is bad, because I don't think so. It's designed more as it's going to be the one that's going to mop up all the trash mobs really fast, especially if you build it in certain ways. Yeah.
Hit a little here, hit a little here, hit a little here, hit a little here.
Yeah. And that's what's so much fun with it, is just you karate chop this guy, you punch this dude, you whack this one with your quarterstaff, and sometimes...
And then you take your second attack.
Yeah.
To do all of it again.
And that's what's so cool. He has these things, and I believe I was the Way of the Open Hand monk, if I remember right.
So I think that you were Way of the Open Hand, and then, like...
That was it.
4 sessions into our campaign...
we got a new subclass, didn't we?
Yeah, it was Xanathar's Guide to Everything came out, and you switched over, and decided that you want to move everything to Drunken Fist.
Yes, because that allowed more and more attacks.
Because since it just came out, I was like, I'm not going to tell you guys that you can't use it. Like, move your levels over.
And that was awesome, because I remember that one was so funny. The only thing was, like, the way the open hand has healing in that, and, you know, if you play DDO, the monks pretty inherently have healing in some form. Mm-hmm. Just because, I mean, they often remind me of, like, Rock Lee and Naruto, you know, not any direct power, but then they unlock their inner self, and you just have lots of power that nobody truly knows what to do with. And what also made me laugh is when you see DDO, the way of the four elements is here for the monk, and they didn't quite know how to do all of that till later. Yeah. And there was even
fifth edition still doesn't quite know how to do that.
Right, because
it's supposed to be like this Avatar: The Last Airbender, and it didn't quite get that powerful.
Yeah, it's not strong enough to use it. You use up your points, or you don't ever use them at all, and you're like, well, that was pointless. But what was funny was they have the Way of the Sun Soul or something, and it was supposed to be this like completely separate subclass for the monk in DDO, and they literally just tied it into like 2 or 3 pieces of equipment that gave you a few special abilities.
And I think that is in Xanathar's Guide to Everything.
The Way of the Sun Soul, something like that.
Or something similar.
Yeah, and it was funny to see it because it was like, apparently it's a thing, but they didn't know how to implement it, and it was supposed to be this bigger thing, and so they went, you know what, we don't have time, we don't have the resources, we're just gonna, here's some wraps for your hands, and here's some stuff for your feet, and one other thing, and surprise, you have an extra little ability. And it's like, man, that kind of sucks. But the monks are just such a funny type of character. Yeah, the Drunken Fist. That was why I went to that, because it was just extra attacks out the wazoo. Yeah. And as you leveled up, I mean, it's just every 2 or 3 levels. It's
tons of dodge, and I think that's what gave you the disengage.
The disengage, yeah. And just plus, if you've ever seen it, what is that movie with Jackie Chan and Jet Li? It's such a big thing. Hi, my daughter just came in. Hey, can you go watch your show? Thank you. And then she left. But what is that show? It's like Jet Li is the Monkey King, and it's this kid that's watching all these kung fu movies, and all of a sudden he gets sucked into this world, and Jackie Chan is the Drunken Fist master.
Nope.
Oh man, I can't remember the movie, but it is such a good film, and it's like living out the Drunken Fist monk all the time, and it's so funny. Plus Jackie Chan's just awesome for movies. But yeah, it's a good class. But the beautiful thing is, Dungeons and Dragons has things for everyone to really imagine and create. And then if you're the crazy one that loves the bard and seducing everything in sight, you know, that's there for you.
Just don't roll that one.
Exactly. So, Chris, what else do you have to say for all this?
Man, I just love so many classes.
Yeah. Don't be afraid to try a new class, because even if you don't like it, just jump off a cliff in the game and
just kill
start
your character.
something else.
Don't be afraid to do that. I've done that before.
Yeah, because you never know quite what you may find behind the scenes that's better than you ever thought, and it is just maybe even more perfect for your character type than you ever realized. And don't be afraid to try a new race that might give you a new sense of how the game works.
Or something that doesn't match up. Don't go ahead and be that half-orc rogue.
Do it. Yeah, because...
Put all your points in intimidation and just tell them you don't see me. I love those memes on the internet. Yeah.
You know, and that's the funny thing too, is with D&D is you could actually just, and I think that actually makes the stories even better, is when you actually don't have things make the most sense.
Yeah.
So, hi. She came in again, she left again. But we have been the Keepers of Nerddom, and we hope that you get some time to go play some D&D and have some fun and try out something new. Take care, and it's good to hang out with you guys today.
See ya.
Take care.